Hello, and welcome to the 4:30 Movie Podcast live. I can't believe we're sitting here at WonderCon doing our podcast. This is pretty. A year ago, I didn't even know what a podcast was, and here we are.
Some will argue we still don't.
I would be one.
That's true. Well, I'm Mark A. Altman, and I'm thrilled to be here. We picked the perfect week to do here. We're technically on hiatus. Ides of March week was our season finale. We'll return in the spring with all new episodes. But if you're not familiar with the podcast, let me tell you a little bit about it.
Well, has anyone here actually listened to the podcast at all?
Yeah,
all right.
nice.
Right on.
Fans.
Nice. Thank you. You didn't raise your hand. We know you have. Always putting stuff on social. Very insightful stuff.
Wait, that's just one finger. That's not a hand.
A lot of people gave us the finger right
pointed
now.
at you. So for those of you who don't know, the 4:30 Movie is a podcast where each week we curate a fantasy theme week of movies we pick in the style of the classic show, the 4:30 Movie. When we were growing up, some of us are too young to remember this. Some of us.
Me.
Yeah, Ashley, that's right. There was the 4:30 Movie. It was mostly an East Coast thing. And they did like Planet of the Apes Week and Sci-Fi Movie Week and
like Giant
Monster Week and all kinds of stuff. So you were always excited about Planet of the Apes Week. So we took the idea of the 4:30 Movie and we're programming it like, if this was a sports thing, I guess. Not that I know much about sports, but if it was a sports
fantasy
thing,
4:30 movie
it'd
week.
be like, fantasy draft. So it's our fantasy movies by theme. So we've done everything from Superhero Week to In the Shadow of Star Wars Week to Films About Filmmaking Week to the Ides of March, which was our Shakespeare Week.
Sword and sorcery, video games.
And for 7 days of 007, we even programmed Saturday and Sunday. That was a big thing for us. So
Movies not to watch with your mom week. That was
that was you every week.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Right. No, actually, that was you.
That was me, yeah. Okay. So I want to introduce you to our expert curators, and then we're going to start with, so perfect. Here in Anaheim, we're doing Walt Disney Week. What could be more perfect? Although I think, quite honestly, everywhere is Walt Disney now.
Yeah.
Pico Boulevard is Walt Disney now. So, but it is great. It was a perfect thing for us to do, to interrupt our hiatus, to come here and do Walt Disney Week. So I want to start by introducing you. You know him as a writer on such shows as Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Rebels, and Rusty and Big Guy the Boy Robot. And did I get that right again?
Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot. And
X-Men the Animated Series. Steve Melching.
Hello.
A gentleman and a scholar. He always comes very prepared. Next to me is the concept designer for such Master and Commander and the upcoming season and last season of Westworld. He also was the visual effects supervisor on the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition, Mr. DAREN DOCHTERMAN. Over here, we have Thursday. I only know him as Thursday.
Codename Thursday.
I've gotten a lot of complaints about this man, so I want to reiterate that they would like to say that many people may be in the audience, may be under 18 years of age, so watch your potty mouth.
Well,
including this gentleman here.
Yeah, because this is actually not completely accurate, because it doesn't actually indicate that some members of the panel may be under 18
yes, that's true.
years of age.
Because my kids are always complaining when they listen to the podcast about
my potty mouth?
Your profanity.
So does Caden.
And I'm like, I can't tell Ashley what to say. If I did, I would pick different films for him. Anyway, he's the writer of Thor, of X-Men First Class. He was a writer-producer on Black Sails and Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. First time I said that right.
You did. I was so proud.
Ashley Edward Miller. And making his 4:30 Movie debut, for Disney Week, where this is it's the happiest place on earth.
It's the big show, kid.
And it appeals to people from what 7 to 70, or
at least 70 people listen to this show.
Oh no, I'm talking about what do they say about the
Children. I love
bigger audience
children.
than that. But with the children.
Disney films are enjoyed by children of all ages.
We have Caden
But mostly young ones.
Yes.
Miller. And Caden Miller is here to keep us honest, to keep his dad from cursing. So good luck. So welcome, Caden. We're thrilled to have you on the big show. And William's helping us out with the AV. Thank you very much, William. We appreciate it. And thank you for all joining us today. This is how great the Comic-Con people are. They scheduled our podcast, our 4:30 movie podcast at 4:30. Someone's using their noodle. That would never happen at New York Comic Con. So I love that. So thank you, everybody in programming here at WonderCon, who's always so awesome.
And that's all the time we have. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.
But before we start, and I want to say, I know we're supposed to do Walt Disney Week, but today we had a tragic passing. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the death of Shane Rimmer. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, thank you, Ron. Who is Shane Rimmer? Shane Rimmer is one of the great character actors who's been in every movie that you've never heard of. Now, you've heard of the movies, you haven't heard of Shane Rimmer. He was in Star Wars. Remember the guy who climbs up on the X-Wing and says, this little X-Wing is beat up, would you like another one?
R2 unit, actually, Mark.
R2,
I got
what
to
did
call
I
you on
say?
that one. You said this little X-Wing.
this
I'm afraid that's incorrect.
What is R2-D2? So, you know that guy? I mean, who could forget those classic lines? That was Shane Rimmer. Okay, you remember the captain of the American submarine in The Spy Who Loved Me? That was Shane Rimmer. He had about 3 lines in that one. And he was also voiced in Thunderbirds. And
He was on the grassy knoll.
What?
Sorry, I'm just thinking of all the things he could have been.
he could have been. So, he was also the commander in You Only Live Twice. He was the guy up in the capsule that gets swallowed by
that guy.
Blofeld's ship. Spoiler alert. And he had the same role in Spy Who Loved Me, basically. So anyway, Shane Rimmer died today, and I had to mention it. He was a great. It was like spot Shane Rimmer, and the reason he always showed up in these movies was he was one of the only Americans working in Britain.
Right.
So whenever they were doing one of these big American movies, he's like in Superman 2. He's one of the NASA guys. He was in everything you watched as a kid. So basically, he wasn't faking an American accent like somebody in the UK would do.
You, Laurie.
So, right, exactly. He'd always get hired because he was a real American, had an American accent. He didn't have to disguise or do a Southern accent or some kind of weird affectation.
He could talk American.
He could talk American. So he got hired. If you look at Shane Rimmer on IMDb, you'll be shocked at all the movies he was in. So enough about Shane Rimmer.
Well, I thought you were going to acknowledge the passing of Agnes Varda, and we were going to have to talk about depressing French films like
Yeah,
Vagabond.
well, you know what? I wanted to have a few people stay for the end of the panel. Unfortunately, a lot of them are staying for Back to the Future 2, which is on after us. And
That's okay.
we
You'll
did
hear
Time
us
Travel
anyhow.
Week, but Back to the Future 2 didn't make the cut. Back
We
to the
did
Future
talk
1
about it
did.
extensively, though, because
We
Ashley
did.
and I are big fans of it.
That's right. You are.
Yes.
You two are. Okay.
Now, let's be nice.
So, Walt Disney Week. Steve, I look to you for Monday. What's your pick for Monday on Walt Disney Week?
Well, let's qualify this at first to start off that these movies that we're talking about, we don't necessarily consider the best films in any given theme. They're just films that we enjoy watching, that we have a personal connection to, or that we feel other people might enjoy. That
I
don't
also
get
want to
a lot
point out it's a big tent, Disney.
Yes.
There was the late lamented label Touchstone Films,
Yep.
which debuted in the 80s with Splash. There was also infamously Hollywood Pictures, which was referred to in the industry as the Sphinx that stinks because they put out a succession of some of the worst movies ever made under the Hollywood Pictures banner. And of course, the little indie imprints, Marvel and Lucasfilm as well, has
Pixar.
put out a couple of movies in Pixar. So the Marvel's a big tent, Walt Disney's a big tent. We'll see, though, what these guys have to say about what they consider a Disney film that should be on Walt Disney
If we
Week.
wait long, Disney just finished their acquisition of 20th Century Fox, so if we wait long enough, every movie will be a Disney movie, ultimately. So
I can't wait to talk about Star Trek during Disney Week. I think that's going to be amazing.
Well, anyway,
We
Monday.
talk about it during every other week. Why
Yeah,
wouldn't we
true.
Talk about it
Now
now.
I just mentioned it. We can check that off the box.
Stephen Melching, Monday.
I'm going into Walt Disney Pictures' legacy of animation, although my pick is from what's considered the second golden age of Disney animation, which began with The Little Mermaid in 1989. My pick is a movie that I believe had the highest budget of any movie in that era, or the second highest. It is a magnificent production. it did fairly well, but isn't talked about enough, in my opinion. And that's a movie that asks the question, what makes a monster and what makes a man? I'm talking about The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Oh, right. I love that people saw that. 1996, directed by Gary Truesdale and Kirk Wise, starring Tom Hulse, star of one of my favorite movies of all time, Amadeus.
Animal House.
And Animal House. Tony Jay as the villain, Frollo. Kevin Kline was in it. Demi Moore. And it is just a magnificent piece of animation.
And the lovable gargoyles.
The lovable gargoyles. Well, they're fine. But what I love about this movie is, first of all, it's absolutely stunningly, gorgeously animated. It's 2D animation. It's some of the best 2D animation of modern times. Great multiplane work, great effects work. Character animation is terrific. It's got a wonderful score by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, who did a lot of the music from the Disney films of that period. And it is got to be the darkest of any of these modern Disney films. Frollo is one of the most villainous villains I think we've seen in a Disney film. I mean, he starts off the movie ready to throw a baby down a well and kill it.
I've been there. It's cool, man. You got through it. It's fine. It's good.
And it has one of the greatest songs. I couldn't believe it. I almost fell out of my chair when I was watching this in the theater back in the day. He sings a song called Hellfire, where he is lamenting it's a song about his lust for this gypsy woman that he feels has got him under her spell, and he's blaming her for these feelings and wants to destroy her for making him feel that way. And I could not believe I was watching that in a Disney movie.
Well, like we said, we're not picking the best. We're picking the ones that we
come
feel.
on! That movie's fantastic.
We're picking the ones we feel. There's no real criteria other
Just
than
because the toys didn't sell at all.
and to shine a light on movies that may be often overlooked. That's
Exactly.
a big part of what we.
It made over $300 million. I mean, it was successful. It just wasn't iconic in the way that Lion King or Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid were.
Well, don't worry, they'll be doing a live-action version soon. Wait
They
a
are.
second.
It was announced. It was announced in
How
January.
many live-action versions of Hunchback? I mean, it's a Charles Lawton version.
Well, the
There's
book,
many.
the novel was written in 1831, and there have been, there's a silent version, there was the Universal version.
We could do Hunchback of Notre Dame week.
We could.
That would
So-
be a whole thing. So anyway.
So, Caden, I think you recently watched The Hunchback of Notre Dame. What did you think?
I think it's pretty good. It's not bad at all.
A ringing endorsement, sir.
Well, what did you like about it?
Like, it was pretty dark, but like with the main character, like how he thinks, how he wants to go out there to like the parade, and because he spent all his life basically in the bell tower, just ringing the bells by himself. Like you kind of feel bad for him, in a way.
Mission accomplished.
That's true. I mean, I think that's something everyone can relate to, this idea of being very self-conscious about your appearance or something, and not wanting, or not being able to, or not wanting to go out into public, and wanting to have friends or girlfriends or boyfriends, and not feeling worthy of that kind of attention. I think it's really sweet, and it's a good message.
It's better than the Black Cauldron. Yep.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I think it's a very worthy pick. I mean, I think I think the music is great, and I agree with Steve. It's actually, I think, very hard to have been a film in that era of Disney at that point in time. I mean, that's 1996, right?
Yeah.
And that's bringing up the tail end of that Silver Age.
Silver Age.
Yeah, and it's at that point, I think that the animation studio was kind of running out of ways to surprise us, and I think they took a chance with that.
The bar was so high from that run of Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Lion King that it was almost impossible to, I think, keep that going. I mean,
That's right.
Look, even Pixar had a run, and then it kind of abated. You just can't make masterpieces after masterpieces after I mean, we talked about this on the show before. Rob Reiner, he comes out of the box with the Spinal Tap and Princess Bride and Harry Met Sally. But then you do North. There's always going to be a North. You just can't.
But this wasn't North. I mean, it's like North is like one of those movies that you're like, wow, okay, thanks for completely disappointing me, Rob Reiner. And I think that the difference is, I don't know that Rob Reiner ever actually recovered from North. And I think that Hunchback kind of suffered from a little bit of Disney fatigue. I think also it was just a difficult movie to market. As much as I think we might appreciate the music and we might have this empathetic reaction to the Hunchback, to being just fascinated by some of the choices they're making, they were really pitching that movie towards adults, right. And then it becomes very difficult to figure out how do you make that something that appeals to kids? Nightmare Before Christmas. I mean, for years, nobody understood like how great that movie was. Disney didn't understand how to market it. I think it's only been within the last 5 or 10 years that we've really seen merchandise, right? I mean, I don't think we're going to see any like Hunchback of Notre Dame mugs anytime soon, or T-shirts. But
we will in a couple of years when the live action remake comes.
Yeah, exactly, and then it'll be all over the place.
What's interesting though? It's because Disney had a whole different philosophy in home video, where they would put things out for a short period and then they go on moratorium, right. And you couldn't get these films for a long time. That I think the reputation of these movies, really go in ebbs and waves, because when they're available, people get really excited,
right.
And then they go away and they're very hard to see. Now with the Disney Plus streaming service, it seems as though they're going to make everything available in perpetuity, and how that will affect sort of the reputation of some of these underseen movies. It'll be very interesting. Of course, people have already seen it on the 4:30 movie, so
right.
It won't be a problem. Darren, Tuesday.
I'm going to go all the way back to the first feature-length animated movie. 1937, Snow White and the 7 little guys that are her friends. I don't know if it's politically correct to say the other words. I don't know. So I'm just being safe. But I do remember their names. Happy, Sleepy, Grumpy, Dopey, Sneezy, Bashful, Doc.
It's kind of like this panel.
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I'm Dopey.
Well, nice to meet you. It is so beautiful, this film. And it opened the floodgates to an entire new thing in entertainment. It was huge. It was the Star Wars of its time. And it broke box office records everywhere. And people loved it, and it became an almost instant cultural icon. It permeated everything in the late 30s. And it is so iconic that some people who see it today don't really understand the massiveness that it was. I mean, they couldn't possibly. But not only did Disney invent ways of, more or less economically creating feature-length animation, but also push the envelope in the technology of making animation beautiful and realistic and jump off the screen to live. Because remember, right before this, the shorts that they had been putting out were, the conventional cartoons, very simple drawings, very simple animation, and yes, they did some fun things with synchronous sound and everything, but no one had ever seen anything like this before.
And it's a testament to the genius of Walt Disney that he was able to bet the farm on this. This is
Absolutely.
a
It was
huge
a
risk.
huge risk.
I mean, now you look back and say, of course.
And it wasn't
now
the
he owns
first
all
time,
the farms.
It wasn't the first time that he went all in on a project.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the last. But I still, when I watch it, it's just still astounding to watch.
Darren, I got a question for you, and probably for Steve too, since you guys are like hip to the animation and the special effects stuff. But my understanding was that Snow White was the first time anybody used like sort of the multi-planar cells and all of that so that they could basically
camera, yeah.
they could essentially move the camera around, right?
I think there might have been a little bit of that in Snow White, but that was I think mostly used. Correct me if I'm wrong. In Pinocchio, the old mill. But there was some messing around with that technology and sort of moving background elements against each other and things like that. But
So they could come in and out of focus and
Sure.
move at different
You know what I love? That we were getting a couple of people, I think, on social at our 4:30 Movie podcast on Twitter were saying that how come you guys have never picked an animated movie? And here we are. No, it is true. We never picked an animated movie.
Finding Nemo.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, we did. I take it back. What did we pick that for? Fish Week?
Under
Under
the
the
Sea
Sea
Week.
Week. Under the Sea Week. That's right.
Smelt Week. Under the 4:30 movie.
Jellyfish Week.
So yes,
called it Guilty
okay, that's
Pleasure
right. Well, we were saying, oh, you guys really avoid animation. Here we are, first two Monday and Tuesday, both
Well, and
animated
Snow
films.
White, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they filmed actors in costume.
They did.
Live action.
They did.
And then
Was it
used
for
that as a
reference
guide.
or was it roto?
It was a little bit of reference and a little bit of rotoscoping, because remember, they had sort of developed the rotoscoping technique for the Alice adventures years before. They did sort of Alice in Wonderland. It kind of, was it? In Alice into the Inkwell, I think it was. And it had a sort of a live-action person interacting with animated characters. So it was all sort of related to this, and the techniques that they developed earlier were all brought to the table on this one.
And they filmed the Spanish version at the same time. Oh, no, that was Dracula.
That was Dracula.
So that's a great pick, obviously. It's a classic. It's the film that started it all. That's why it was the ABC Sunday night movie beat. See, the film that started it all. Snow White.
Has Aiden seen it?
You have, I don't know, have
Caden?
you seen the Snow White and the 7 friends of Snow White?
I do not believe I have, but
Okay, I've failed you as your father. In so many ways.
Well,
but
now
this
you
is
have something to
special.
look forward to.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
And there's a neat song in it about what to do on your way to work.
Well, and also Emperor Palpatine is in it. He's great.
Yes, that's
you
correct.
know?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's terrific. I mean, it defined
Emperor Palpatine and his symbolic fruit.
it defined the Disney formula for a long time. I mean, it set the tone. I mean, you go look at years later, Sleeping Beauty. I mean, so much of it, just it set the table and the template for what these films are and how to adapt these fairy tales to at that time a contemporary audience. Right. And it was a true phenomenon. And it's amazing because these characters. I don't know if the fairy tale would have continued to be this thing so much in the zeitgeist if it hadn't been for the animated movie, which, most kids today, even today, have seen and loved and embraced. So.
If their parents care enough about them, that is.
Which apparently I don't.
But anyway, it's a great choice. So I'm going to go to Ashley for Wednesday.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. No.
Okay, wait, no, tell them why. Because Ashley picked on Valentine's Day week, we did great love story weeks. Great love story movies, right? This genius picks Empire Strikes Back. Although I have to say that by the end of the podcast, spoiler alert, he changed his pick to Breakfast at Tiffany's. So
They're
good for
basically
him.
the same film. Only without puppets.
And fortunately,
no
without
breakfast.
Mickey Rooney.
Right. Or George Papard.
I love when a plan comes together. Okay, Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the world of live-action filmmaking and fairly recent history for this one. It's a movie about the worst pirate I've ever seen. Johnny Depp stars in, I think, one of the great cinematic surprises in Pirates of the Caribbean. And I say that it was a surprise because I don't know that anybody had any faith that that movie would be any good whatsoever because it was
Until
based on a
the
ride.
first trailer.
Until the first trailer, which suddenly, Johnny Depp just emerges fully formed as this character that has on the sheer force of his personality has turned that great movie into a kind of a colossal waste of time. But It's truly fantastic. It's funny. It's scary. Gore Verbinski's direction is awesome. He has such control over that tone. It is, for the most part, it is incredibly well cast. It's very witty. It's pretty much everything you want from a film. And the amazing thing about it is this. So at the time that that movie was released, you would think that if you were the president of production of Walt Disney Studios, that your job would be fairly secure. But literally 2 days after that movie was released, the president of Walt Disney Studios lost her job for reasons that continue to elude me. But Pirates of the Caribbean is it's just a fun adventure romp. It is everything that you would want from a movie. I think the other thing that it manages to do is it manages to be a good movie about pirates. Up until that point.
Yeah, it was Cutthroat Island.
Yeah.
And it just a succession of awful pirate. There was the Roman Polanski pirate movie.
Oh my God.
That was a disaster.
Yeah.
And then Cutthroat Island, which was one of the most famous failures of all time financially. And pirate movies were box office poison.
Oh, 100%. And I think the thing that saved it was, putting zombies in it. But, Caden, you have seen Pirates of the Caribbean. What did you think?
It is a very funny film to watch. It's a really good family movie, and also has surprise in it. So in the scene when Elizabeth grabs the knife and stabs it into the bad guy's rib.
Barbosa.
Yeah, I do not remember the names really well. Okay. You just go oh, he's gonna die, but then you realize that he didn't, and you're surprised, huh? And then she steps out, and then you see the zombie pirates, and then she starts freaking out, and then she turns back, and then she sees the captain, and then she feels like she's trapped. And overall, it's a really good Disney film.
Yeah, I think, people forget what a good film that is because the awful procession of sequels have followed it, which were big and bloated and, just unwatchable. And millions of people kept going to see them anyway because they kept hoping they'd be good. But the first movie is really terrific. Yeah. And, and it also started this whole idea let's do a thing based on a theme park ride. I mean, it was the beginning of IP mania. Oh. I think this role-playing game should be, or somebody made a stuffed animal that would make a great movie.
No, I remember back in the day seeing that all the agencies have a thing called the open writing assignments, where they keep track of all the different studio projects that they want to develop. And I remember seeing that on the list of things that Disney wanted to develop in a movie. I think really? You're going to turn this ride, which I love the ride, but you're going to turn that into a movie?
Yeah, see, I want to see Star Tours get turned into a movie.
Right?
That was always my thing.
Interesting factoid about Pirates of the Caribbean is when Johnny Depp began, what has now become this iconic performance, nobody had any faith in it. The studio was freaking out. They thought it was the strangest. They thought he was the worst pirate they had ever seen.
That they had ever heard of.
Yeah.
But you have heard of it.
Yeah, they have heard of it. Yes, exactly.
Because he was doing Keith Richards.
Yeah, basically. And then, of course, Keith Richards turns out to be his father, which I both believe
But now, if he'd done Mick Jagger, it wouldn't have worked.
No,
but
not
Keith
at all.
Richards is good.
Yes. It never worked to do Mick Jagger. Caden, what was your favorite part in Pirates?
Honestly, I do not know.
Okay, fair enough.
No, it's great. And, at the time that, Orlando Bloom was being pegged as the next big thing, but he'd been in a couple of movies that hadn't really worked. It was the same thing with Keira
those
Knightley.
weird Peter Jackson films.
And then they both got, a lot of mileage out of those movies.
Yep.
But then the whole thing is once you have a success, let's keep finding ways to bring the same people back, rather, no matter how convoluted it is. But it was a great villain, great, and it was a mishmash of genres. Really, really cool stuff.
Yep.
So Thursday, You know, it's interesting. We have the 2 animated films. We have a beautiful theme park attraction adaptation. One of my favorite rides, by the way, as well.
Mine too.
Yeah, I love that ride. So I'm ready for Splash Mountain next.
Right. Which is the one that's based on Daryl Hannah and.
Right. So we're, yes, that's right.
There's a mermaid at the bottom of the
and
pool.
Daryl Hannah in Splash Mountain, the sequel you didn't know you wanted.
I'm going to pitch that right now. I think I just did.
Well, you can only get your agent on the phone for another 2 days,
Yeah,
so you
true.
better hurry up. Look, we've talked about animation, we've talked about theme parks. So I feel, you know, Disney has become so associated now with superheroes and great comic book characters that I figured I would be remiss if I did not, you know, call attention to one of these legendary characters in the Disney stable. And of course, that's Condor Man.
How did I know?
Condor Man, you know, look, here's the thing. The studio, people forget because Disney owns the world now. Condor Man, by the way, is not my pick.
Well, that's disappointing.
But you know,
There was a time.
back in the late 70s and 80s, Disney was at the bottom. Disney was the Paramount of studios. It was in hock. I mean, they were lucky they had real estate in the theme parks, but you know, Disney could not release a film that was successful. Ron Miller was running the studio. This is before Eisner and Katzenberg came in and transformed it. So that, you know, they were putting this is the age of you know, movies like Black Cauldron, but The Black Hole in 1979, a movie we admittedly love, but for no good reason.
Well, they would do like the Escape from Witch
you know,
Mountain.
and Escape from Witch Mountain. Yeah,
the
but
Cat
even
from
that
Outer
was
Space.
like the kids' movies are different. That was good because that was sort of you know, Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
All that stuff is fun. But you had the Kurt Russell movies in the '60s and the Absent-Minded Professor, and this stuff was sort of the next iteration of that in the '70s. So the Witch Mountain movies, I don't think that's bad. I think that was serving like the Disney audience. But people thought, oh, Disney was only for kids, right?
Right.
It's like Tricks. It's for kids.
It's rated G
And-
for kids.
But
Right.
you know, they
Like
were just
Logan's
doing movie, and Condor Man was their attempt to create this big superhero franchise with Michael Crawford, you know, as Condor Man.
You may remember Michael Crawford as the man who starred as the Phantom of the Opera
Yeah.
on Broadway.
And it was basically what later would become Gotcha. You know, he gets involved. You know, he pretends to be this superhero that he really draws as a comic book artist. Anyway, that's not my pick. So, you know, then they launched Touchstone, and Splash is their first PG movie. It's very successful. It's a delightful film. And, you know, through their new labels, they start to do some really interesting movies. Now, a lot of these guys are looking at me and say, I know where you're going with this. You're going to go say New York Stories. It was an anthology with Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and Woody Allen.
And the kids love
who
it.
directed the great Oedipus Rex, which is a wonderful, wonderful sort of vignette in that. But I'm not going to pick New
Mark
York
has this
Stories.
thing where he mentions so many movies before his own
But
pick.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there because it's very, look, the
mention a
Disney
movie.
library is so hard. Now, if I wanted people to if I just wanted people to get excited, and say that's a great pick, I would say The Rocketeer. But I'm not going to say that because I know you want me to say The Rocketeer,
I
and I
want you to.
kind of want to say The Rocketeer, but I'm not going to say The Rocketeer.
But you just did say The Rocketeer.
Rocketeer.
Yes, you did.
And now he's going to show up. Great.
You know, but I really, it was, you know, and Ed Wood, which was a Touchstone movie, was already on the show. Can't do that. You know, if I was just doing opening title credits, I would say Ruthless People. But, yep, see, thank you. I knew somebody would get that. So I'm kind of like at the point where, you know, I really want to say Beauty and the Beast because it's brilliant. It got nominated for an Oscar for Best Picture. But we've had 2 really great, or 1.5 great animated movies picked. So I'm going to go, and here's my pick. And I think that, and this really is my pick. And it was really, look, this was tough. It's not Rogue One. It's, I love Rogue One. Who Frames Roger Rabbit? Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And I just adore this film. Robert Zemeckis, you talk about advancing the medium in terms of his ability to combine animation and live action. It was based on a book called Who
Censored Roger Rabbit?
But that wouldn't look good on a marquee, you know? Who Censored Roger Rabbit? They changed it to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's so brilliant And the fact that they were able to incorporate all these classic Warner Brothers characters, which I'm sure when Caden sees it, he has no idea who Bugs Bunny, and then, you know, like when he sees the other Hanna-Barbera character, like, you know, Huckleberry Hound and all that, he's like, what?
Betty Boop.
Betty Boop, and then it ends with "That's all, folks," and of course it's like one of the most brilliant endings of all time. But and then they have Tinkerbell because they didn't want to end the movie with a Warner Brothers character. So you get a Porky Pig saying "That's all, folks," and then Tinkerbell flies in just so Disney gets the last word. Isn't that so Disney? So. It's just everything about that movie is great. Bob Hoskins is great. Obviously, Kathleen Turner as you know, Jessica Rabbit. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure all of us except Steve love this movie because it's based on Chinatown. And Chinatown, as we know, is a masterpiece and a great movie, unless you're Steve Melching.
I've never denied it wasn't a masterpiece or a great movie. I just said I didn't like watching it.
Okay. So anyway, my pick is the absolutely delightful, and I went to see it again recently, played at the El Capitan, and it holds up. It's just as entertaining as the first time I saw it. And if you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, check it out on the 4:30 movie, or more likely, download it or buy the Blu-ray or stream or whatever, because it's just, it's so fantastic. And I have so much respect for Roger Zemeckis, even when he fails with something like The Wire.
Or Robert Zemeckis.
What did I say?
You said Roger. Who framed Roger Zemeckis?
Roger Zemeckis? Who's that? And how great is, and I'm going to tee up there. I'm going to tee up how great is Christopher Lloyd, right?
Oh,
so
he's the
great.
best.
So great. And that whole scene in Toontown is wonderful, and it's
A
just
merry-go-round broke down. It's quite a loony selection for a bunch of drunken reprobates.
it's an inventive work of genius, and you know, it's a mainstream entertainment that you can enjoy on so many levels as a cinephile, as a kid, as an adult. It's just
Not all at the same time, but in succession.
It's just great. So I can't say enough good things about it. So my pick for Thursday is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Cool.
Now we get
Friday.
to Friday. So the pressure's on you, kid.
Right? Go for it. You can do it.
Okay, so I wanted to pick a Star Wars movie that. So I decided to pick Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Oh, a very controversial choice, but a good choice.
A very good choice.
Excellent.
This panel loves that choice.
There's like a lot of good content in it. Like how Rey just wants to convince Luke Skywalker for him to teach her to be a Jedi, and like how to use the Force. And then she goes into the place, and then like there's also her connection with Kylo Ren in like at some scenes in the movie. Then like there's Finn that's kind of looking for that's trying, and then they're all just trying to.
Can I ask you a
Kylo
question,
Ren.
Caden?
Yes.
Because I really like the movie too. So I want to ask you, but how do you feel about the Canto Bite sequences? Because that to me is where the movie sort of falls down a little bit. But as a kid, I wonder how you respond, because there's such a great arc for that kid who at the end, you know, who has the broom, and you realize that, you know, this is the future of the Jedi, or at least the future of the Resistance, is like these kids will one day grow up and have, you know, fight the good fight and be the people that ultimately bring down evil. Did that resonate at all for you?
That actually kind of made the film, to me, more interesting. Because you're wondering, like, oh, is this kid going to be in a future movie? Or is he not? Because he has the resistance symbol at the end of the film. And then, like, you see them playing with the toys, and then the alien comes and then scares them away.
Is that your favorite of Star Wars movies?
Probably yes. Star Wars: Last Jedi, yes.
So it sounds like the thing that you most responded to in that movie was the relationships between the characters, right? Would you
Yes.
say that's fair?
Yeah.
See, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think if my son were here, he'd probably say The Phantom Menace just to screw with me. So I'm really glad. I'm really glad to hear, you know, you sort of more modulated, reasonable kind of. There's so much. Look, that's a whole nother panel. We haven't done Star Wars Week. We've done the Shadow of Star Wars Week, where we talked about movies influenced by Star Wars. And if you haven't heard it, you can go back and listen to it. I mean, I think that's where we picked The Black Hole, and we picked Moonraker, and we picked Star Crash. No, maybe not Star Crash, but Alien. I think.
Battle Beyond the
It was
Stars.
Battle Beyond the Stars. It was a great week. And so we haven't done a Star Wars Week yet. And I think that's something we should do because I think that this sort of warrants more discussion, you know, and I know that certainly Steve, who worked on some of the great Star Wars projects like Clone Wars and
Rebels,
which I love, is you know, somewhat we're not on the same page necessarily about Star Wars. It'll be a very interesting conversation, I think, if we all talked about sort of the original, the prequels, and this new trilogy. So maybe that's something we can do in the future.
What I really liked about Last Jedi is that's a Star Wars. I didn't think I could be surprised by a Star Wars movie anymore after all we had seen, you know, with the original trilogy and then the prequel trilogy and the first few coming out of Disney. I felt like I'd kind of seen it all, and I didn't feel they would want to take many risks in a big budget Star Wars film, and I know some of those surprises are controversial to people. I don't love the movie entirely, but I was delighted watching parts of that movie because I kept being surprised by it in ways that I really liked. In a way that Force Awakens, on the other hand, I felt like I'd seen it all before, and it was a little dull to me.
You're just a hater.
No, you know what? It's funny because I think Steve makes a really good point in the sense that, you know, look, clearly there are a lot of people who are not fans of Last Jedi, and I think one of the joys for me, despite whatever minor failings it might have had, was that it was surprising. That wasn't what I expected, and I think a lot of people were disappointed by it, were disappointed because it wasn't what they were expecting. But again, much longer conversation. Probably not, Disney Week is not the right time for it. So let's talk about, because we're going to add a day. We're going to add a day because it is Disney Week, so we have to do the Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday, right? That would only be appropriate. So we're going to do one more week. This is where we have to come to an agreement together, and I would ask if there's anyone in the audience who has some suggestions that they want to make. There's a mic right there, and then we can sort of discuss it and weigh our decision for Sunday for the Wonderful World of Disney. Michael Eisner will not be introducing it. You know, if we can get Mickey for scale, maybe. So let's see if we have anybody who wants to make a suggestion.
I would.
Oh, Caden, why don't you start us off, please?
So my suggestion is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh.
That's a fine choice, but Guardians of the Galaxy was...
Did we include it?
Yeah, we did pick it for... What week was it? Was it Alien? No, it
Oh my
wasn't
gosh, I
Alien
don't
Week.
remember.
But I'm pretty sure we...
You know what? I might have picked it for in
It
the
was
Shadow of Star Trek week.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
It was in the shadow of Star Trek week.
And
So
it's like we're related.
So yeah, it is almost like you're related. Yes, sir.
Never cry wolf.
What, Abercrombie and Finch? I can't hear.
Deadpool.
Never cry wolf. Never cry
Oh,
wolf.
never
Never
cried
Cried
wolf.
Oh, Never Cry Wolf.
I
Oh,
swear I kept hearing
interesting.
Deadpool.
Yeah, Never Cry Wolf. That's a good.
That's a good one.
That is a
live-action
movie
movie.
that I have not seen it. I would love to see it, but
It's really good.
I think it's very difficult to find. I mean, it's not. It
Yeah.
was never
Not
released on
Disney
Blu-ray.
Plus in a couple of months.
Yeah.
maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
that's a good
that's a good
suggestion.
suggestion,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's Disney, but The Incredible Mr. Limpet was always the
It's
fourth.
not.
It's not.
Warner Brothers.
Oh.
But it's a good movie.
And he almost picked that for Under the Sea Week. We talked about it at length in
Yeah.
the Under the Sea Week, but that's a good suggestion.
And a
Warner
very
Brothers.
good 4:30 movie.
What?
A very good 4:30 in the afternoon movie.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And don't forget, by the way, 4:30 Movie is available for download, including this episode will be available next week, even though we're on hiatus.
Wherever you look for podcasts.
Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's free, and there's like, what, 25, 26
I
of them?
can't emphasize that enough. The first season, there's something like 29 episodes. It's free. We're not trolling for Patreon donations or
We have no
there's
sponsors.
no firewall.
You don't
It's
have
like
to go
you
fund us.
listen to it. It's free, and hopefully you'll be entertained.
We
and
make
maybe
nothing on it,
informed.
and we pass the savings on to you.
We do it for the love of the game.
For
Yes.
the kids.
So animated, I suggest Lilo and Stitch. It starts out subverting the cute and fluffy Disney thing, but ends up being some of the most meaningful emotional content, I think, of any of the Disney movies. and live-action Dead Poets Society on the Touchstone.
Yeah,
Oh,
Dead
Dead
Poets
Poets.
Society.
That's a good one.
Had I got to list another 20 movies, I probably would have gotten around to Dead Poets Society. Oh, Captain, my Captain. Thank you. Carpe diem. Yes.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
Hello.
I'm going to bring the spirit of Jay West into the room and say Tron.
Tron. Yeah, how did we not talk at least about Tron? Another
Well,
groundbreaking film.
I almost prefaced by saying I probably would have picked Tron myself. I knew Jay West a little bit too. He was a huge Tron fan. But we already discussed the movie on Video Game Week.
We
so I
did.
We did, along with
disqualified
Cloak
it,
and
but-
Dagger.
Wait, but we didn't pick Tron.
I didn't. I
Oh, you
picked
did?
Tron.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Tron, so basically if we've picked a movie before on the show, it's disqualified.
Try not to do it again
Yeah.
unless we forget.
Yeah, which we have.
But
We
I'm
have-
a huge fan of Tron, and I might have picked it
Yeah,
otherwise.
because that's why Casablanca wasn't on Oscar week, because we had picked it for Love Story week.
Yep.
So, sometimes something is more appropriate for a later week, but we've already picked it. So,
Like The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to go with the theme of something that would feel like a wonderful world of Disney on Sunday. How about 1992 live-action musical starring Christian Bale, Newsies?
Newsies. See, now that's our kind of pick, right?
Right.
I love that. Newsies. That's hysterical. Great James Horner score, too.
That's right.
Yeah, Newsies. Can you believe
Klingon
that's a
theme,
play
it's
now on
amazing.
Broadway? That's insane. That's Newsies. Oh, my God. 90s nostalgia. It never ceases to amaze me. Okay, next.
My pick is Fantasia.
Yeah, okay,
Very
excellent.
different. And it even has a nod to The Last Jedi with the sorcerer's apprentice. The kid reaches out and that
That's
broom
right.
comes
That's
to
right.
him.
Very good.
You are absolutely right. And now, is it Fantasia or Fantasia 2000?
No.
Oh, I'd say the original Fantasia.
Yeah, okay.
I almost picked that
'Cause of
my
Walt.
my grandfather was friends with Ward Kimball, who is one of the 9 old men of Disney Animation, who was one of the principal animators on that film.
Is this the same grandfather that worked on Citizen Kane?
No, that was my great-grandfather
Oh,
on the other
okay.
side.
I have to tell you, I mean, how we miss talking about Fantasia, it just shows what a deep bench there is for Disney Week. Obviously, Fantasia. It's interesting because Fantasia is a movie that I think when we were younger was like the definitive Disney movie. And like I remember when it was re-released in theaters, we all went to see it. It was like a really big deal. And somehow home video has sort of diminished.
It's because the
its
experience
stature.
isn't the same at home. It's definitely a movie that you need to experience as big as possible.
And it was the original music video, in
true.
a way. It was like MTV before anybody knew what MTV was.
Let's quick go through these.
Yeah,
We're
okay,
out of
let's keep
time.
going.
All right, I'm going to go with The Cat from Outer Space.
The cat.
Oh, excellent. Cat from Outer Space. See, you guys get it. I love it. This is great. We got to do these live things more often. We said Black Hole was picked for In the Shadow of Star Wars Week. You better believe I would have picked it if it hadn't been.
Trying to hit that spot, the live action period that you kind of skipped over for the week, was 20,000 Leagues and Under the Sea Week.
That was.
It was.
We did an Undersea Week, 20,000.
Then
yes.
I'll go with Swiss Family Robinson.
Okay.
Oh, great
There you go.
choice. Great choice. Swiss Family Robinson. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't gone with any of the Kurt Russell films where he's squaring off against Cesar Romero. Those great films. Especially
Swiss Family Robinson, very influential to George Lucas in Star Wars, too. There's a lot
That's
of, you
true.
watch that film, you'll see a lot of echoes of that film in Star Wars.
If you're going for something with a lot of heart, I'd recommend any of the Herbie movies.
The Herbie.
Yeah, it's the Herbie, the Love Bug movies. Again, it just shows what a rich, diverse group of films. Because that was on when I was trying to narrow it down, the Love Bug movies, and they're all so much fun. We're talking about the original ones, not the Lindsay Lohan one.
I like the least released one. Herbie Goes Insane, where he gets put into a mental institution. I like that one.
Yeah, but which of the
And he
Herbie
dreams
movies?
of being a
Do you have a
person.
favorite Herbie the Love Bug movie? I
I like the first one. Herbie
Yeah.
the Love
I like
Herbie
the first one, but I think the second one's a lot of fun too. I mean, I love when
Herbie goes to.
it wasn't Monte Carlo, yeah, but it was the
Herbie
second.
Goes
It was the
Bananas?
the second one where he goes.
Herbie Goes Bananas?
Remember when he goes in the elevator and he goes up the elevator into the office?
yeah.
Yeah, I like Herbie.
I wanted
like
to pick.
Volkswagens.
I love that. I wanted to pick That Darn Cat. It stars a Siamese cat, and my wife and I have several Siamese cats, and we missed the golden age of movies when there were Siamese cats and everything, including
but you know what we need
Lady and the
now?
Tramp. There's a
We need
Siamese
an
cat.
Avengers Endgame where it's Herbie the Love Bug and Knight Rider.
There we go.
So it's just you time them.
We need Siamese Cat Week is what we
That's-
need.
yeah, the cat from outer space meets that darn cat. Yeah.
Well, it got one of the Gabor sisters in there. It got Patton in there. Rescuers Down Under.
Rescuers Down Under. That's a good
Oh,
one.
what about the original Rescuers?
Oh, the Rescuers.
Yeah. The original is always better than the sequel.
Okay,
So.
we gotta.
Oh,
wrap it
we're
up.
talking.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, we got to wrap things up.
time.
Let's give this person the last. Oh, you are the last person. You're the moderator, the person who holds the sign. So listen, that's our pick. Monday is
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Tuesday.
Is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Wednesday's a perfectly legitimate pick from Ashley. Shockingly, go
I
ahead.
know, right? Pirates of the Caribbean.
Thursday is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and
The Last Jedi.
on Friday, and then Saturday.
I mean, Sunday.
Sunday. Sunday.
Kids,
This
race
is a
fans.
tough one.
Wow, this is a tough
I don't
one.
know. I'm feeling the Herbie vibe myself.
I'm
now.
feeling Herbie too.
I'm feeling so Herbie. Caden, do you feel Herbie?
Probably yes.
Wow.
Okay.
This is bananas. This Herbie is bananas. Herbie the Love Bug, or the Love Bug as we'll call it, for Sunday. And I want to remind you, 4:30 movie is available every, we're on hiatus, but you can get all the classic episodes. And we're putting up special bonus content during our hiatus where we do live commentary about the individual episodes. So even if you've listened to it, there's
Even
a
if it's
reason to
old,
listen.
there's new.
There's something new about it. And we're going to return this spring with all new episodes. This is going to air next week, I guess. Bill Ritter, special thanks. Bill Ritter's out there somewhere in the dark.
Somewhere.
Thank you.
Crying
Hey, Bill. It
in the
wouldn't be
dark.
possible without Bill and our producer, Natalie Miscali, who's out there, and Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Wait, before we go, I want to point something out.
Yes.
During this entire podcast, during this entire panel, I did not drop a single F-bomb.
Watch it.
There's still time. And I want to remind you that if you're a fan of our sister podcast, Inglorious Trexperts, tomorrow we got a panel for you.
10 o'clock.
10 a.m.
In this room.
We are doing a 30th anniversary tribute to, wait for it, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, with screenwriter David Lowery. You can find out what the hell was he thinking. It's going to be great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is a production of the Electric Surge Network.